Welcome to the Edge of Greatness podcast.
How do you clarify between an interview and a conversation then? Because I'm trying to wrap my head around how that differentiates between interviewing and just talking.
If you think of, go back to Joe Rogan, somebody we talk about, right? And I used him as an example with the students. Because if I say, who are you listening to? They'll usually say a Joe Rogan type interview. See, he has 3 hours. And I actually said this sentence today. I said he has 3 hours and he might be utilizing some substances that you guys aren't legally allowed to use during his interview. So let's talk about that. And I said, yours, no substances, and 300 seconds of airtime. So when you default to a conversation, kind of that Joe Rogan, yeah, well, that's interesting. I didn't know that. And they go back and forth. There's just so much more time to play. What I try to get people to lean into is interview as a verb. So yes, we're having a conversation, damn good conversations, if you will. But I think interviewing is those pointed questions, not where were you on the night of the 13th, but the high velocity questions we talk about so much and the specific questions that you ask on your podcast. I think there's a problem sometimes with conversation in the sense that it sounds like we have all the time in the world. We're tempted to say things like, let's shoot the breeze, or worse words. And it's like, well, that's just too leisurely for me. I've often said, like, I want my guests to be on their toes, not their heels. And I want them to be engaged. So those are some of the broad stroke thoughts that I have about the two.
Would you consider the length of conversations that we have to be a hybrid then?
The length meaning we have.
Yeah, because we talk for about an hour, right? Our episodes are usually about an hour. They're not the 3-hour conversation where we can kind of and ha and go back and forth. But we do have time where we talk. Like, I'll take the mic for a second and I'll pass it back to you. But
yeah, I think it's an astute observation. I would say this: I think it's more trendy to say conversation, right? Even my brand, damn good conversations. But the reality is, it's still more of an interview. Like the reality is, you're going to ask me more questions than I'm going to ask you today. You're open to me asking you a question or two right now, but it's not the format. So the format kind of dictates, you've been kind enough to invite me on, you're going to interview me. We hope that interview has the scope of a conversation. And I think your point about the hybrid makes sense. If it was a 5-minute, 10-minute, 15-minute format, I was on a show once where the host asked 6 questions and he asks the same 6 questions to every guest. There's no way I'd be comfortable calling that a conversation. But I think you're onto something with that hybrid idea. It's interesting.
Yeah, because I remember the conversation with Brian Levinson, and he talked about when he was interviewing for the NBA draft, and that was obviously more of an interview, which I feel like ours is definitely an interview, like you said, but I've had guests ask questions back and I've had that back and forth, but it's not to the same extent where we're sharing the time, we're sharing the mic. So
you're a sports fan. How about Syracuse, right? They do like the zone defense with man-to-man principles. Maybe what we do here is an interview with conversation principles. How's that sound?
I absolutely love that.
Thank you for joining us today on the Edge of Greatness podcast. If you haven't yet, please take a minute now to subscribe and review our show. Join us again next week as we continue to dig deeper into the key components of greatness. The path to greatness is never linear, so remember to keep pursuing greatness no matter what. Keep stretching your abilities, reach for the stars, and fall flat on your face. But remember, no matter what happens, whenever we fall, always get up. Until next time, I'm Charles Schultz, and this was the Edge of Greatness podcast.